Let us now have a look at text elements, specifically at text labels. Now, I think that almost every game that has some kind of UI, some kind of menu system settings, has at least some sort of text in it, and often it's a pretty important part of your UI. Some games like management games or stuff like that are much more text heavy, and the text is actually one of the most important pieces there. And things like a good readability, a good layout, a good font are actually quite important. So that's why I wanted to cover this in its own video. Now, as mentioned before, this time I have just set up some very simple layout here with just a couple of elements, and we will not go over this particularly. Now, obviously, you can find this in the resources if you want to recreate this exactly, but basically just add your own labels and style them however you want to. That's not the topic of this lesson now. The only important thing is that we have some kind of text. And now listen, if you are now laughing because of this game, you are probably much younger than I am, or you are just a hater of, I don't know, real-time strategy games. But this is a legend, and it was probably one of the things that actually brought me into first playing games as a teenager and then also trying to work on games. It was probably one of the games that I spent most of my time when I was a teenager. Probably started with this around the age of, I don't know, 11, 12. And so at that time it was really something big. But you can also see from that what age I probably am around. So there are new versions of this. Obviously, I don't know, the current one is Age of Empires 4, I think. So if you are a hater, first try it out and then hate. Now, obviously, we don't really care what texts we have here. So when we take a look at our text label control and look at it here in the inspector, we can see again there are not many properties added to the text element as opposed to a pure visual element. The most important obviously is just the text itself, and that's kind of what you would expect. One maybe more interesting thing, and we will see that in a second, is this enable rich text option. And I basically wanted to show you two things on this text control. The first one being how do we actually change a font? Because obviously in games that is one of the pieces that you will do quite often. And if you have designers, mixing the right fonts into your game is oftentimes a big piece of your success, how professional your layout and your UI works. Now, I'm not a very big expert on fonts, but I at least wanted to show you how you can change those. And now to change your font, you have to go into your text property, and you basically have two ways how to change your font. There is a rather more easy way if you just need it quickly and you're not a designer, you don't want to spend too much time on your font. And then there is a way how you can customize even the fonts that you imported. Now what I did here in my folder, in my project folder, I just dragged a TTF file. So this is, you probably know this is one way how you can store your fonts on your computer, and you just have to drag this over. And now one way to set the font is to go into this top version here on font. Just select your font, and now one thing that you have to do, at least in this version, is to disable the font asset here because it's kind of winning, it's overriding the other one. So just choose your font, and now you can see we are having this nice nerdy font in the second line here. So this was very simple. Just drag your font into whatever folder you have, and then you can choose it. Now let's just unset this for a second. Let's just go back to where it was before. Now we are having our default font again. And now the more complicated way, kind of when you need to customize your fonts, what you can do is you go over your font, then you can go create text, and you can do font asset. And now when you click on the font asset, it opens in the inspector, and now you can set all sorts of things here. You can have specific assets for your specific font weights, stuff like that. Now, the designer people amongst you, this will probably look more familiar to them than it looks to me. Most of those settings I have actually never used and never set. But if that is something that is important to you, and for some games this might really be important, then you can do much more customization here. And now in order to actually use this font, we now go to this other option here for font assets. And now you just select your font asset and you basically get the same effect. So we covered how to change the fonts, and now one other interesting thing that you can do with your text is, and that's where this enable rich text thing comes in, you can actually not only set a pure string on your label, but you can use something that is called rich text. And so when we open a web browser here and search for Unity rich text on Google, you get this result here for rich text, and you can check what kind of tags you can set. Again, for HTML people, some of those options will be pretty familiar. Now you cannot use everything here. I think what you know from HTML, but there are a couple of tags that might be nice. For example, like changing your color inside of a label, not setting kind of the color for the whole label, but be able to use different colors inside a label. You're able to use different sizes inside a label, different colors, different materials, have a bold tag, and things like that. There's not much more, but that is already quite something that you can do with this. Let's just try this out for a second in this third line here. So let's say that we want this Age of Empires text to be bold, so we would have to do something like that. Closing tag. Now you can see when we go out, this is bold. And now we say is a great game, exclamation mark, and let's say we want to do great. We want to give this a particular color, so we would do color is, now I will paste the color, but that's one way how it works. Now again, in the end, those are just tags. You just can provide a color here, the hex value, and then close the tag, and that's how you use rich text on your elements. Now when we go to the inspector above here and disable this thing, then you see your actual raw string that you actually put in here. When I enable this back again, it works. Let's now quickly save that. Now I already connected this to the UI here, I think. Yeah, I just changed the layout file to this text file that we were working on just now. I'll just remove this button screen here. So we just have our UI document with the text layout. And now in the game view, you can see we can already preview this in as it would look for our actual game. And now the final thing that I would like to do is just to show you that obviously you can also use this in a script. So I created a script here, text screen, just as we had before. And now let's just change into the code editor. We have this boilerplate code, basically the same thing we had before. We are getting our root visual element. You can do this all on one line. There's nothing special here. And now we are just taking a reference to one of those labels. Now I'll just briefly show you what label that is. I have one empty label down here, and this one I called my label. And this is the one that we are grabbing here. And now let's just do something very simple. Let's just go to the update loop. And now let's say if we press a key on the keyboard, we can do that with get key down, for example, and let's say key code .t for text. And so now when we press the T button in play mode, something will happen. This stuff will happen that we write in here, and I will just paste something in here. Now we can see when we set a string by script, we can also use rich text, obviously. And one thing here again that you might have noticed is we are not accessing the style property, the general style property of any visual element, but we are accessing the text property of the label. So that means that this is the piece of kind of the piece of functionality that is exposed for us through the label. So other elements, most other elements don't have a text property. This is just something special for the label. And that's again what you would expect. Now you want to set the text on your label, and that's how you can do it. So let's save the script. Let's move back to Unity. Go to our game view. Now we can see the last line is empty. We press the play button. And now when I'm over this, when I have this window selected and I press the T button, nothing happens obviously because I forgot to connect this. So let's go text screen, play mode again. Now I'm pressing the T key on my keyboard, and now you can see we can set our text. And obviously you would probably not do this by setting a key, but now however you loaded your text, you can load it from a database, from a scriptable object, from whatever you however your game is structured, you can set your texts with rich text on your labels. And I think that's enough for a quick introduction on the label component. Now, obviously, there are other elements that also deal with text, like, for example, text input elements, and we will use them in some other lesson later. But for the pure label, I think that's it. I think, yeah, with changing fonts and being able to use rich texts, you can already do quite a lot of stuff with your labels and create kind of interesting UI experiences, but there is not really much more to say about them for now. So let's now move on to finally to a more complicated control.